film. So this is Civil War, just came out this year, so 2024, written and directed by Alex Garland. The IMDb plot summary: a journey across a dystopian future America, following a team of military embedded journalists as they race against time to reach DC before rebel factions descend upon the White House. So other than Kirsten Dunst, it also stars Wagner Moura and Kaylee Spaney. So
And
Civil
her
War.
husband, Jesse
Oh,
Plemons.
uncredited. So I couldn't put that in.
Yes.
He's uncredited in the film. But yes, her husband is also in this movie, which is fun in that scene just to see the two of them in there and be like, this is
Hmm.
interesting. How are they going to play this? But yeah, what are your first Civil War thoughts? How Kirsten did, and yeah, just general thoughts on the film.
I mean, this movie, even before it came out, and now even more so, has become a bit of a hot button conversation topic. And I totally understand like why people are maybe mad at it, but also not getting what they're looking for. And often the criticism that I've seen about the movie is that the movie doesn't take a side or the characters don't take a side. And I'm okay with that part. In fact, and in listening to Alex Garland, the director, talk about this more, and I sort of do believe in this, that I think we live in a world that's just way too divided. It doesn't have to be. And it's in a way almost sort of more interesting to actually just let it all hang and let the people make their own decisions, like all this debate about why are California and Texas together. Well, I don't think we need to spell it out. You can make your own theories. And I love that aspect of the movie, that it doesn't spell it all out. And at the end of it, I think what the movie does a great job at is that it sort of states that kind of everybody is the same, because you forget who's on which side at some point, even in that Christmas kind of decoration. And this is a spoiler warning, I suppose, if people
Oh,
haven't
right.
seen it,
Yes, we
but
should say
but
that.
there is a scene where, some gunmen wearing sort of army gear are shooting, and for a journalist, which is Kristen Wiig and the team, one of them asked them, who are you shooting? They're like, we don't know. Nobody knows who you're shooting. And that's sort of, I guess, what happens in Civil War. But you can sort of abstract that to our own world, that all these people who are in arms with each other about things that they disagree about. Well, actually, if you zoom out, you might find more similarity in it, I guess. So I think that's a pretty strong message that comes across in the movie. I guess the other big theme is just journalism, and
Hmm.
how on one hand it's very heroic and what they do, and these are photojournalists that they're literally in the line of fire, capturing, documenting these photos and such. And that feels important, that feels weighty, it's necessary. Of course, somebody has to do this, and they do that. On the other hand, the fact that they're sort of boosted and reveling in their own ego to the point that they are not even moved by it, and it's all about how can I get the next best photo. I think it's a critique in some ways
Hmm.
as well. So I think it's a very interesting portrayal, and you can be again on any side of it, but that really struck me, is that yeah, you admire all these people, but at the same time you question their intentions, what are they driven by. And especially when you see it's purposeful that the four lead characters in the van who are taking this road trip to DC, they're all at different ages of their lives, right? So
Hmm.
Kaylee Spain is this upcoming person who's really enamored by Kirsten Dunst and sort of finds their way to join this team. And she's hungry, she's out there, and she would do anything. Versus you see Kirsten Dunst's character, who's kind of been there, done that, hardened through all
Hmm.
of this, is sort of at the end of her
Right.
career of like what goes on from here. And then Stephen McKinley Henley's character is like much older. He's seen all of this, but he's still, it's almost like an addiction, like that he didn't have to come on this journey, but
Right.
yet he does. So it's saying a lot about journalism without kind of really beating you all over the head. So all that was amazing. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that the filmmaking, the budget that Asgarland got, and the way he put that to use, like it's definitely a movie full of set pieces. It's
Hmm.
magnificently crafted. We talk a lot about mise en scène on this podcast, so from sound design to very specific music choices, which can rub you the wrong way or the right way, however you want. But it's all very intentional and purposeful. All of that felt like a war movie made now, as we think about great war movies made over time. This is
Hmm.
kind of in that league, if you will. Of course, I need more time and more distance from it, but it definitely, you can feel the filmmaking in a good way. I think where this movie loses me is not so much in what side you're on, because like I said, I don't really care about that. I think to me, it loses me on just a lack of character development. I don't really care about any of these people, and they're not really given a lot to do with. They're making the most of what they're given to do with, which it sort of ends up then being that I don't really care much about what they're going through.
Hmm.
And maybe that's the point. Like, we as audiences who are consuming the news are also kind of part of it all, right? Like, you tune out once you've seen this massacre, this school shooting, this terrible thing, you start to just tune out. So maybe that's the point. But at some point, I'm not going to remember much of this movie, I think, as visceral as it was, because it just didn't have that kind of character build up connection, at an emotional level. I missed that. And I think just a little bit more detail into that would have been amazing.
Hmm.
And you'd ask about Kristen. I mean, she's very good in the movie, but she doesn't have much to do, honestly. And she's doing the most with this kind of hardened exterior, and you can see the layers and layers of what's gone on behind those eyes, and there's just no light in her whatsoever. It's all been sapped out. So you see that, of course, but there's nothing else.
Yeah, I thought the movie sucked. Um, and I did think it was a total like, why does this exist? Like, if you're gonna make a
Mhm.
movie called Civil War set in the present in the United States and don't give you any context to what's going on, then what's the
Yeah.
point? Like, just make it a war set on Mars or a war set in, 1640 in like Iceland. Because the things they were trying to say, I think, after thinking about the movie a little bit more, though I did only see it yesterday, is that the journalist, like, if you're a photographer, how much are you culpable in what's going on? Like, if you see someone get killed, are you supposed to save them or are you supposed to not? And if you're really not, right, you're supposed to let it happen. Well, what does that do to you over
Yeah.
time if you're basically just numbing yourself to the horrors that you have to witness because you can't participate? Like, part of your job is just to document, not to participate.
Right.
Like, you could set that in any war, in any conflict, if you're going to make it this thing. And a lot of it was the marketing of making this into like, oh, this is going to be about the American civil, a new American Civil
Right.
War. Absolutely wasn't about that, I thought, at
No.
all, because you strip out all those details. Like, I do want to know why California and Texas were together. I mean, maybe I can disagree with that, but just give me something so I can hang my hat on like what actually is going on in this world. So for me, like, that's why I didn't care about the characters, because I didn't understand what was going on, like, on the larger level. So like the characters, I couldn't relate to them. Like, I'm not afraid for them. I'm not like, it just, none of
Yeah.
it matters because the movie purposely pulls all these punches to try to pretend like, I got it as arrogance from Alex Garland, who I'm not a huge fan of, especially the movies he's written and directed. But it's like, oh, I'm gonna be cool, like not take a side, and that's gonna make me so cool. I'm like, no, that just makes you lazy. And the movie can have a side. It doesn't mean the audience has to agree with it or not, but just have, or maybe the side's not the wrong thing in this. It's more like the context. Give some more information here. Like, I felt like I got more information from the trailer and the marketing
Mhm.
campaign in terms of what was actually going on in the wider world or the wider conflict than I did in the film itself. I just thought that was honestly lazy, and not like, I wasn't into it because I couldn't relate to what was going on. And I think your point around the characters not having much to do, I agree. But at least if you're giving the world more interesting, like the world building being interesting, then I can kind of glom on to like the characters, or at least care about the situations that they're in. But this just didn't give that. And maybe that was the point. I'm thinking, are you trying to take that, holier than thou stance of like, oh, I'm not political? Like, well,
Right.
everyone's political and everything is
Yeah.
political. Like, you can't escape it.
Yeah.
Being non-political is the most political thing you can possibly do. But I just don't like, it's like, I think it's laziness, honestly. So I did think the movie was not good. I mean, technically, you're right. I think it was very well done in terms of the scope of the film. That the sound design was amazing. The Jesse Plemons scene was really well, like,
Mhm.
done. Even though, again, I'm like, what's exactly going on here? Like, uh, whose motivations is what? It's like I couldn't feel that afraid because I didn't know what was going on in the wider conflict. But it's I think Kirsten Dunst, actually, I think, did an admirable job. Like, kind of what I was referencing earlier about, I'm so used to her being having a lot of spunk and personality. The fact that now she's this weathered, beaten down, photojournalist that is so jaded, she doesn't care about anything anymore. Like, that affected me, at least. And then there's a little bit of a cliche kind of arc with her character that I've seen in a
Oh
bunch of
yeah.
movies. Where, like, now I care because there's a young person here. And
Yeah.
but I think she actually did probably the best job actually in the cast, personally. I was most impressed with her in terms of what she was able to convey very subtly without a lot of dialogue or a lot of even like physical acting. You could just sort of see it in her eyes and her expression sometimes as she was slowly breaking down more
Yeah.
and more over the course of the film and just being like, why? How can I participate by not participating in this?
Yeah.
Right? Like they're
Yeah.
the bystander just having to take pictures, and that must weigh on you at the end
Of
of the day.
course. Yeah. And
Not
I wish
not being
they'd
able to do anything.
explored that more,
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah, me
because there's
too.
so much richness there, right? Like you've been doing this. And yeah, like I said, I agree with I don't really care much about the context because I can sort of just live in the present of
Yeah, I
like, okay,
can't do
this is
that.
where we are at.
Right.
But I think I like the word lazy or even pretentious, I guess. Like do one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Either do the context and then let the characters hang on that, like you're saying, or preferably for me, don't even do much exposition, but let the characters guide you, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are we not so much how we got here, but more like what are our motivations and why are we reacting the way we are reacting? And
Mm-hmm.
there are some scenes, but I just wanted way more of that. Like you see her in the bathtub scene, like sort of haunted by all the images that she's taken. I want
Mm-hmm.
to know more about that. Not
Yes.
saying do flashbacks or backstories, but just have her spend more time in our thoughts, and
Mm-hmm.
versus we go from set piece to set piece to set piece, which I don't know. So I liked it more than you did, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like, but I definitely wrestled with it. There's somewhere in this concept like a pretty incredible movie, but
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't think it delivers.
Yeah, and speaking of just like other movies, when I realized this movie wasn't really about the conflict or America trying to say any things like that, and it was about photojournalism. It reminded me both of like the Oliver Stone movie Salvador, if you've never seen it, about a photojournalist,
Mm,
true story, really good sort of explorations of similar themes. But actually, the first thing that came to mind after I left the theater was a YouTube clip I saw that was of a BBC documentary about nature photographers, and
mm,
they're filming this thing of these penguins down in Antarctica. And these penguins are trapped in this ravine and like they start freezing to death. And, like all their babies are dying. And the photographers are like, well, we can't really go in there. Like, have to be breaking the ethical code of like what we're supposed to be doing. And then it got so bad. The guys are like crying, like, we have to do something. So they like dug a tunnel and then let the penguins just naturally kind of escape. But they were wrestling with that line between, do we get involved? What is the ethics of this? And I really thought that like 2-minute clip from this BBC documentary kind of was more of character development and moved me a lot more seeing this than what I think Alex Garland was trying to do, or at least the part of the movie that I latched onto the most about the photojournalism piece. I'm like, this just was better with the penguins than what he was trying to do here.
yeah, no, there isn't much there, sadly. And even like the super on the nose sort of shot of, again, spoiler warning, spoiler alert, the way Kirsten Dunst comes in and saves Kelly, and then she's been shot at as she's going down. It's just so on the nose.
Yeah,
I almost like I didn't laugh, but I sort of had like a bit of a, oh my gosh, they're
yeah,
doing this.
yeah, me too. Well,
Yeah.
well, that was our discussion on Civil War. Hopefully that was interesting for listeners. If you haven't seen it, maybe you won't want to see it after this or not. I don't know.
No,
It
I would
is
say see it because I think
okay,
it
okay.
is an interesting debate point. It does spark conversation, which I think is amazing, right? That's
Mhm.
what one of the goals of art is, that or should be. So I think it definitely does that. So I would say go watch it.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'll recommend it. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.